June 2020, middle of a pandemic, riots in the streets, economy in free fall, and somehow 2 astronauts are sitting in a spacecraft that looks like it was designed by Apple, built by a company that didn't even exist 20 years ago, about to launch to the International Space Station, not on a NASA rocket, on a SpaceX rocket. And here's the crazy part. NASA's basically cheering from the sidelines, having paid this private company billions of dollars to do the job they used to do themselves. How the hell did we get here? How did a guy who made his money from PayPal end up running America's entire space program? And more importantly, why did the US government let him? The answer is way more interesting than you think, and it explains everything about how America actually works in the 21st century. Chapter 1. The crash that changed everything. February 1st, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia is coming home from a routine mission. Everything seems normal until it hits the atmosphere over Texas, and then it disintegrates. 7 astronauts gone in seconds, live on TV. Now, shuttle accidents had happened before. Challenger in '86 killed 7 people too, but Columbia was different, because by 2003, people had started asking the question nobody wanted to answer. Why are we still using this thing? The space shuttle was supposed to be revolutionary, reusable spacecraft that would make space cheap and accessible. NASA promised it would fly every week, maybe even every day, like an airplane. Cost per launch? They said $10 million. Reality? The shuttle cost $1.5 billion per launch. It flew maybe 4 or 5 times a year on a good year, and it had killed 14 people in 135 missions, a failure rate that would shut down any commercial airline instantly. After Columbia, Congress launched an investigation, and what they found was brutal. NASA had become bloated, bureaucratic, and risk-averse to the point of paralysis. Decisions that should have taken weeks took years. Simple modifications cost hundreds of millions. The entire system was designed to employ people and spread money across congressional districts, not to actually accomplish things efficiently. One engineer testified that getting approval for a minor design change required 17 different signatures across 9 different departments. 17 signatures for a minor change. Meanwhile, the shuttles were aging. The technology was from the 1970s. Parts were literally being salvaged from museums because the companies that made them didn't exist anymore, and NASA had no replacement plan. None. The shuttles were supposed to retire and then nothing. America would have no way to send its own astronauts to space. So what was the solution? Initially, NASA wanted to build a new government rocket. Constellation program, it was called. Cost estimate? $230 billion over 15 years. But then, some people in government started asking a dangerous question. What if we just hired someone else to do this? Chapter 2. Enter the billionaire who wouldn't take no for an answer. Elon Musk in 2002 was not the Elon Musk we know today. No Twitter ownership, no flamethrowers, no Doge memes. Just a PayPal millionaire with a crazy idea. He wanted to send a greenhouse to Mars. Seriously, his plan was to land plants on Mars, take a photo, and inspire the world to care about space again. Cute, right? So he flies to Russia to buy a rocket. The Russians literally laugh in his face. They quote him $8 million for one old ICBM. He negotiates them down to $4 million, they agree, and then, when he comes back with the money, they jack the price back up to $8 million. He's furious. But on the plane ride home, he's doing calculations on his laptop, because of course he is, and he realizes something. The materials in a rocket cost maybe 2% of what rockets actually sell for. The other 98% is labor, bureaucracy, and profit margin, and he thinks, I could build rockets cheaper. Now, everyone in aerospace thought this was hilarious. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, these companies had been building rockets for 50 years. They had PhDs out the ears, billion-dollar facilities, government contracts coming out of their ears. And this internet kid thinks he's just going to show up and build rockets better than them? SpaceX's first 3 launches failed spectacularly, like blowing up on the launch pad failed. Each failure cost about $60 million. Musk was running out of money. One more failure, and the company was done. Launch 4, August 2008. Falcon 1 reaches orbit. First privately funded liquid fuel rocket ever to do that. NASA's watching, because by 2008, they've got a massive problem. The shuttles are retiring in 2011, and Congress has already slashed the budget for their replacement program, which means starting in 2011, America, the country that won the space race, would have to pay Russia $80 million per seat to send astronauts to the ISS? Russia, our geopolitical rival. We'd be totally dependent on them. So NASA does something radical. They create the Commercial Crew Program. Basically, we'll pay private companies to develop spacecraft, and whoever succeeds gets to taxi our astronauts. Boeing got $4.2 billion. They were the favorite, established company, proven track record, employed thousands in congressional districts across the country. SpaceX got $2.6 billion. They were the underdog, controversial CEO, history of exploding rockets, never sent humans to space before. What happened next shocked everyone. Chapter 3. When the underdog lapped everyone. Boeing's Starliner was supposed to fly astronauts in 2017, then 2018, then 2019, then 2020. They finally did an uncrewed test in 2019, and the spacecraft couldn't even reach the ISS because of software problems. They tried again in 2022, technical issues. When they finally got astronauts to the ISS in 2024, the spacecraft had thruster problems and left the crews stranded for months. NASA had to send a SpaceX Dragon to bring them home. Boeing, the company that builds Air Force One, that's been in aerospace for over 100 years, couldn't get it done. SpaceX, first crewed flight in May 2020, right on schedule. And they didn't just match NASA's capabilities, they exceeded them. The Dragon capsule could carry 7 people versus the shuttle's 8. It could stay docked at the ISS for 210 days versus Soyuz's 200. It cost $55 million per seat versus Russia's $80 million. And it was reusable. SpaceX was landing the first stage boosters and flying them again. But here's where it gets really crazy. While NASA was paying SpaceX to build Dragon, Musk was using that revenue to develop Starship, a fully reusable rocket spacecraft combo that could carry 100 tons to orbit. NASA's new rocket, the Space Launch System, cost $4.1 billion per launch and is completely expendable. You use it once and throw it away. It's literally using space shuttle engines, technology from the 1970s. Starship? Musk claims it'll cost under $10 million per launch once it's operational. $10 million versus $4.1 billion. Even if Musk's off by a factor of 10, it's still not even close. And suddenly, NASA's staring at a situation where their own rocket is obsolete before it's even finished. They've spent $27 billion on SLS development, and this private company is about to make it irrelevant. So what does NASA do? They lean into it. They hire SpaceX to land astronauts on the moon using Starship. The Artemis program, America's big return to the moon, is now dependent on a SpaceX vehicle. NASA's basically admitting their own rocket isn't good enough. SpaceX now has contracts worth over $15 billion with the federal government. They launch more rockets than every other US company combined. They've sent more cargo to the ISS than anyone. They've launched 60% of all mass sent to orbit globally. They operate Starlink, the world's largest satellite constellation, which the US military now depends on for communications. One company, one controversial CEO, and they've effectively taken over the entire American space program. Chapter 4. Why the government let this happen. Okay, so here's the question everyone should be asking. How did the US government, the same government that built the interstate highway system, won World War II, and put 12 men on the moon, become so dependent on one private company? The answer is uncomfortable, but it's important. NASA's budget peaked in 1964 at about 4.5% of the federal budget. Today, it's 0.4%, 0.5%. They're being asked to do more with a fraction of the resources. Meanwhile, the way government contracting works is fundamentally broken. When Boeing or Lockheed gets a NASA contract, it's usually cost plus. That means whatever the project costs plus a profit margin. If the rocket goes over budget, the government pays more. If there are delays, the government pays more. There's literally no incentive to be efficient. In fact, there's a disincentive. Finishing early means less money. SpaceX changed the game by demanding fixed-price contracts. They said, pay us this much and we'll deliver. If we go over budget, that's our problem. NASA loved this because it capped their costs. SpaceX loved it because if they came in under budget, they kept the difference. Suddenly, you had a profit motive for efficiency instead of waste. But there's a darker side to this. The government has essentially outsourced critical national infrastructure to a private company controlled by one very unpredictable individual. Elon Musk has absolute control over SpaceX. No board can overrule him. No shareholders can force him out, and his political views have become increasingly, let's say, controversial. He's gotten into public feuds with the Biden administration. He's made statements about Taiwan that align more with China than with US policy. He's threatened to cut off Starlink access to Ukraine during an active war. And there's nothing the government can do about it, because SpaceX is now essential. The US military depends on Starlink for global communications. NASA depends on Dragon to reach the ISS. The Artemis moon program depends on Starship. We've created a single point of failure for America's entire space infrastructure. And that single point is a billionaire who tweets rocket emojis at 3 a.m. and names his kids like Wi-Fi passwords. Some in Congress are freaking out about this. There have been calls for regulations, for government oversight, for developing alternatives. But here's the problem. SpaceX is so far ahead that catching up would take a decade and cost hundreds of billions. Boeing tried. They failed. Blue Origin is trying. They're years behind. The Chinese are developing similar capabilities, but they're also years behind. Like it or not, America bet on SpaceX, and now we're all in.
Final chapter.
Here's the wildest part. We're just at the beginning. Everything SpaceX has done so far, the reusable rockets, the crewed missions, the satellite constellation, that's just the foundation. Starship is designed to carry 100 people to Mars. They're not even hiding that the end game is human colonization of another planet. NASA's along for the ride now. The government that once employed 400,000 people to reach the moon is now basically a customer of a private company with big ambitions and bigger rockets. Whether that's the future we want or not, it's the future we've got, and it's going to be one hell of a ride.
Thank you for watching.